Kyle Klingman with Track Wrestling. We go out to Valentine, Nebraska, where we have Jason Kelber, three-time All-American. He was an NCAA champion for Nebraska in 1991 and a three-time state wrestling champion in Iowa for West Marshall, four-time finalist. Jason, how are you?
Good. Thanks for having me on here.
Well, this is fun, man. And the natural question everyone will want to know is, how do you go from West Marshall and end up at Nebraska, not Northern Iowa, not Iowa State, not Iowa? How did that happen?
Well, if you have a nickel, give me a nickel. I'd be a rich man for everybody to ask me that question. But it's a good question. It is. I came down really close to going to Iowa State. I really respected Iowa and the Hawkeyes and what they were doing at that time. And Dan Gable and what he did there was awesome. And I looked at going there. But, my dad had a little input there. He kind of steered me away. He wasn't a big Hawk fan, go figure. But he was a big Cyclone fan. And they started kind of looking at me there that way. But came down between Iowa State and Nebraska, because Nebraska, my best friend, they were offering him a scholarship to Nebraska was at that time. And he was trying to talk me into go jump on the border. And that played a part of it. But I also lived on a farm in central Iowa, 30 miles from Ames. And we had a lot of hogs at that time. And I decided this is kind of funny, but at the end, I decided that I didn't want to be scooping hog manure on the weekends, on my off time, and I wanted to be a little bit farther away from home. So I liked the athletic department in Nebraska and what Tim Newman was trying to do. He was first-year coach there. I liked the part of being part of a building process that they were selling me on, and that's what we kind of did. We went up through the ranks and got tougher, and so I felt like we were part of that, and I had a big building block when I was a part of that. So, but it wasn't an easy decision. Hawkeyes, they were looking at the brands. I think obviously the year after me, they were a year behind me in high school. And they had sent letters and they recruited me a little bit, but we just kind of didn't go full tilt into that. And I decided to, I had some other offers, Notre Dame, Iowa State, Nebraska, and those were kind of what I focused on. And anyway, the rest is history. And I really respect what the Hawkeyes did. And I was this close to becoming a Cyclone. Jim Gibbons was head coach. I really like him. Great guy. And I'm sure I could have wrestled for him as well, but kind of where I'm at.
What was your relationship like with your dad growing up?
It was, you might say love-hate. No, he was a hard case. And we lived on a farm, and, my mom worked in town. She was a nurse. My dad cut hair in town. We had a kind of you might call it a smaller farm at the time. And I had two brothers and a sister. And, we were left there to do a lot of the work, which was normal. You should do that. But when stuff wasn't done right, my dad cracked that whip and made you do it over again. And so it was, well, I wouldn't say slave driving, but I'd say it was hardcore, and we had to toe the line, and if things weren't done right, you did them over, and it's that simple. And we had to be done efficient too. But we had a good time on the farm. It was a lot of work, and it's funny. We'd invite friends over, we had a cabin out in the woods, and we had a creek and a pond and everything. We'd invite them over to have fun, but first we'd have to get done about 3 hours of work with those people that came over. It made it faster, so they didn't seem to like to come over to our house too much after a while. But
Well, of course, Iowa is known for wrestling, and I think a part of that is the farming communities, the small towns, and how that translates. And certainly there's an era that it was built through the agrarian culture where you built your strength on the farm. Now there's all these clubs that you can get into, and it's a high-level, high-technical product. But at the time, did you feel like farming was part of the process to get good at wrestling?
Yes, I do. I think it played a big part in my growing up, and not just my dad, making you toe the line and being pretty harsh, but also, we didn't have all the digital, the GPS, click the button and the tractor goes down the field. we had kind of older equipment, and we had to piece things together and make things work, and you had to cobble some things here and there. But it wasn't really a hobby farm, but it was in between a big farm and a hobby farm. It was in, we at the end there, we were raising like 1,000 hogs a year or so, something like that. And it was a hard work. And then I had an older brother that that was one of the big, he made you toe the line too. He was 3 years older than me, and he wrestled a little bit. He didn't have the kind of success that I had, but he was always tough and scrappy, and 3 years older than me. So I always tested my mettle against him. And I always wanted to beat him, and I hardly ever could. And it made me strive to climb that mountain, beat those insurmountable odds, and not be afraid of that competitor that he was just above, head and shoulders above you, that you thought. But I was going to try it. I was going to try it any way I could. I was going to try throw the kitchen sink at him if I had it, and and if it didn't work, it didn't work. But I'm going to try to win. So.
Did your dad then push you pretty hard in wrestling?
No, not really. He was more standoffish at first, and then the better I got, the more he got into it. He got obviously more interested in it. Hey, this kid's got something, So then he started getting a little more into it, but he never really pushed hard. Made you. I've seen, I've been in coaching for a while now, and I've seen dads drive their kids too hard or hard enough, and it was, he was just interested in my success, and he wanted. Then later on, it's kind of funny though. He was trying to give me advice, and he never wrestled in his life, and God bless him. He played baseball in high school. They didn't have wrestling, but he was trying to tell me I need to do the gorilla shakedown or something, do some more high flying moves. And I said, no, the shots are what gets it, and we had a little argument, and he kind of said, you know what, I don't know if you're going to win the state title this year, because you're not able to take criticism and improve your game. I said, well, Dad, I'll be honest, you never wrestled before. I don't need to do that. And he says, I bet you're not going to win state this year. I said, I bet I do. He said, what do you want to bet? I said, I bet I get to go out for football next year, because he wanted me home on the farm all the time. You could pick one sport and that you'd be gone for. And I won the bet that year. I beat Tom Brands in the state finals 10-1. And he allowed me to go off football. And then I was starting nose guard on the football team as a senior, and I had a lot of fun. But yeah, he didn't drive me hard, but he made you toe the line, and he raised an eyebrow if you weren't doing the work you're supposed to be doing, or if you're eating too much and you're supposed to be dropping a little weight or something. But he wasn't that kind of guy that always drug you to the wrestling room and or made you do wind sprints at home and pull-ups and whatever. But he always looked at you, and you knew he was checking over your shoulder to see if you were doing what you needed to be doing.
Well, you mentioned Tom Brands, and of course you're connected with Tom and Terry, wrestling them through high school and college. What would you say your relationship or your awareness was of those two guys during high school and then eventually college?
I really didn't know them too much until I was a junior, and they were sophomores. And then they were kind of raising a little bit of eyebrows and winning things. One of them was at my weight, Tom was. Terry was at the weight below us. And, and they were a different conference, and we never met them during the year. And I wasn't afraid of them. I had won the state the year before. Should have won it as a freshman. I shot in the last second, and freshman year I was ahead by a point. Shot in for a takedown with 7 seconds left in the match. The guy spun around me at the buzzer, and I lost it. But anyway, that was Scott Mangers from Don Bosco, and I should have never shot that takedown, but or tried for that takedown. Anyway, Tom, I knew about him, and then Terry had just won it. Okay, state finals, Iowa in Saturday. Terry just won it. The TV crew was coming over to our mat because they wanted to see the twins win it. It'd be twin state champions, which would be a pretty cool thing, And then I kind of ruined their plans. I beat Tom, and so they didn't get that interview they wanted, I don't think. But then we were on the same freestyle team. I didn't freestyle a lot because I was at home on the farm again. I was working, and I did do a little rodeo. I rode bulls and bareback broncs, and so what sport I did during the summertime was rodeo, but I did do freestyle one summer, and qualified for the nationals and went on the national team, and we trained for a week, and that was fun. I mean, I thought the brands were funny and interesting and cool. At first, I always thought they were cool, but they used to fight each other, and I used to antagonize them a little bit. Like, hey, he called you a wimp over there, and I tried to get them going. It was kind of funny, and I was good friends with them, and I still am. I respect the heck out of them, and after years after we wrestled, we always respected each other, and it was good stuff. Good Iowa tough farm boys and rural Iowans.
Did you feel like your process during Nebraska, what were the growing pains? Because we mentioned you were a 3-time All-American, so didn't place as a freshman, then you got 6th at the NCAA championship, 2nd to Terry Brands, and then won it over Terry Brands as a senior. Did you feel like you developed in the right way at Nebraska?
I did. I had a lot to learn, and I didn't realize that. And they wanted me to wrestle as a true freshman. They told me that recruiting-wise, that we want you to wrestle right away next year because we're redshirting an older guy. And I said, yes, I'll do it. And then I got into there and wrestled as a true freshman, and I didn't realize the gap that I had. And God bless my high school coach, Jim Steyer and Doug Deerdorf. But when I got to college, I really needed to learn a lot different angles and position, and it just took me a while. And so my freshman year, I went 22-11, and wasn't what I wanted. And then I redshirted the next year, and I really learned a lot my sophomore year, which was redshirt year. And I was able to go to open tournaments and really study up without cutting all the weight and doing things, and really absorb more technique. And then as a sophomore, I feel like I could compete. And I got beaten in the national tournament by Kendall Cross in overtime and Jim Martin in overtime. And I really thought I beat Kendall Cross in that match. Oklahoma City Nationals, I don't know if that was the right call, but I was ahead 8-7 with 4 seconds left. And they called me for stalling. And I just turned him twice in the last 20 seconds for a 1 count. And I went back to a leg lace, and they called me, and it kind of gave them the point to tie it up. And he beat me in overtime. But anyway, so I felt like I had arrived and I could compete with anybody at that stage. And before that, I didn't realize that, because as a freshman, I realized, man, you got a long way to go here, and you got to put your nose at the grindstone and figure out the angles and positioning and finishing and defense. And I felt like I progressed well. Mark Perry was assistant coach, Tim Newman, and Mark Perry worked a lot with me technically, as well as Newman did too. But I really learned a lot, and it just took me a little bit of time to get to that level. And I wish I could have done a little bit earlier in my career, but it is what it is,
Well, it's interesting because the names you're mentioning, Kendall Cross, 1996 Olympic gold medalist, 1992 Olympian, and then Terry Brands made world teams from 93 to 95, 2-time world champion. These guys are icons. They met in the 96 Olympic trials, and you have wins and losses against both those guys. But what were you doing during that time when they were succeeding? Were you watching and saying, that could have been me? What was that like?
You mean after they went on with their careers?
Yeah, went on with their careers, yeah.
Yes, you're right. I was watching them thinking, geez, I could probably do something at that level. But at that time, I was coaching Indiana University, and I had young guys I was trying to bring along, and I really was unselfish, I guess. I should have been more selfish with myself. And I didn't have that goal as a kid, probably because I was doing the farm and rodeoing on the weekends, but didn't have that Olympic champion goal. And I should have had that at an earlier age, a burning desire to do that. I think I would have gone on more. But and I did think that, as I see Kendall, he came and trained with me for a while before he went to the U.S. Open and then the Olympics and all that. And then after he won the Olympic gold medal, he came back and he says, hey, part of this is yours. And he said, now it's your turn to go. You should do that. And there was a part of me right then, I almost, tracked that way. But then I had, recruiting calls to make, and I got on the road and tried to build the team that I was trying to build. And I let it fall by the wayside. So your will to sacrifice and your will you got to have burning desire. You got to have the goal first. You got to have what you want. And I guess I didn't want it bad enough. That's what it boils down to.
Yeah, you said something really interesting there. So when you think about where your journey was, it was because you didn't really have the Olympic vision, and that wasn't, maybe the seed wasn't planted for you. If you would have had that, do you think you would have gone on and tried it?
I think I would have. I think I needed to have that at an earlier age, and I just had, my desires were elsewhere, outdoors, hunting, fishing, rodeo, and I would have liked to have planted that seed earlier in me. And when I got done with college, I was kind of tired of I was ready to step out for a while, and I didn't really feel that was me going on and competing. And just one of those things. And I didn't, and I don't, like I say, I don't have big regrets. I have little regret. I thought, you know what, these guys did go on and do really well. And I was already wrestling with some of the best in the world at my weight class. And I really probably should have done that. I maybe dropped it short, but boy, I've had a lot of fun in between though. But it was interesting.
Yeah, that 91 match with you and Terry, what was your game plan going into the finals?
Throw everything I had. And I wasn't going to leave any rock overturned, and I wasn't going to leave any tool in the bag. I was going to bring it. I was going to bring everything I had, and that's my mindset on every match. Is if that guy's going to stand up in front of me, he better be ready to stand up in front of me, because I'm going to bring everything. And if that isn't enough, if that guy beats you at the end, and I'm going to get up and shake his hand and say, you just beat everything I had. Because I'm not going to leave anything behind. And that's the mindset I had. I didn't know if I was going to win or lose that match, but I had confidence I was going to battle, and it was going to be a war. And that's what I wanted. And it came down to it. I was able to hit some moves and fortunate enough to score some points, and it went good. But I never really shied from anybody. And I don't know if that's what my older brother gave me, during those fights we had growing up and trying to beat him. But I just got to a mindset where I wasn't afraid of anything. I would take on most any comers, any competition. And I thought it was fun. It was exciting to try to throw your medal at the best. And so for big matches, I would get up. I would really be excited for them. I wouldn't get too nervous. Obviously, you're going to get a little nervous, but it wasn't like some guys freeze up. Some guys get a little cautious and stuff. And then you probably should be a little cautious. But, man, I was ready for those big ones, and I really felt good in those moments,
Do you think people know about your history and what you've accomplished?
Some, yeah. And that's okay. And I don't need to have everybody know it. I've always wanted to fly under the radar. I haven't been a good one to be in the spotlight. I don't like it that well. I'd rather fly under the radar and be a little more low key. And some people do know it, and that's fine. And and I wasn't the best ever, but I was among some of the best. It was what I think in my mind, that I could compete with most any guy lightweight at that time, and I'd bring it.
Well, and just talking to you, it's amazing because you have this total recall. You can go back to 4 seconds left, and you're just going through details in the matches. How do you have that? That's cool.
Well, the matches you lose, you remember those. And I could have been a 4-timer in Iowa, and I blew that freshman year. They had 4-3 with 4. We just went out of bounds with 7 seconds left, and I had 4-3 or 3-2, one of the two. I can't remember what it was, but. And I got back to the center. I remember in my mind, thinking, I want that leg. I'll attack that leg. And I should have been thinking, put on your roller blades and skate backwards. But I shot in, and he spun around me, and he used my aggressiveness against me. And I learned a big lesson from that, and I'll never forget that. But there's times when you got to be smart. You just can't just be aggressive.
How'd you end up in Valentine, Nebraska?
Outdoor life. It's wide open out here. I was living in Omaha, Council Bluffs area, actually south of there, about 30 minutes on a little lake called Beaver Lake. Beautiful little area, but I'd heard a lot about this area. I'd never been up here. A lot of hunting and fishing stories from friends and acquaintances that I've heard about this area. And then a job opportunity came up, and actually Tim Newman and another guy coerced me or talked me into coming up here because they were running the bank and an insurance company up here, an insurance agency, and they needed somebody to run the insurance agency. They called me, and I said, man, I don't know how to spell insurance, let alone run an agency. Oh, you'll learn fast. You'll learn fast. And so I said, well, let me check this area out. So I checked it out. Beautiful country, open sand hills, lakes, river valleys. You're right next to the South Dakota border, where you jump up there and you're in the Missouri River lake chains and all kinds of lakes. And it's just, I really love it here. And that's what got me up here, is the openness. I mean, you get permission. I don't own a lot of land up here. I have a house in town, but I have some friends that have some land and big ranches, and you get on a ranch here and it's 40 to 60,000 acres, and you can get lost. And that's what I love, is going out in the middle of nowhere and having an adventure. And I like to hunt, fish, and artifact hunt, and to have a good time up here. But
what's it like when Valentine's Day rolls around in Valentine, Nebraska?
It's pretty funny. That a lot of people send their letters through Valentine just to get postmarked with the Valentine postmark symbol, and then they go on elsewhere too. But it's pretty, Valentine's Day and Valentine is kind of a cliche, or whatever, but it's pretty big deal here. And we live in Cherry County, and they call it the Heart City. And but I tell you, the county that we live in is the second biggest in the country land wise. So it's a huge chunk of land, and it's just a neat area up here. A lot of tourism. A lot of people go down the river. The Niobrara River flows right through here, and a lot of people tube, kayak, and canoe that river. And then, of course, people come up here there's a lot of outfitters up here for hunting and fishing and things like that. But it's a fun place to be. It's a touristy area, But right now, lately with this COVID stuff, the tourists slowed down a little bit. We need to open it back up. But I'm going to show you. I'm sorry, I jumped right back in here, but a buddy of mine made these hats, but I don't know if you can see it, but it says wide open. This is the Valentine Badgers, but it says wide open. We're trying to get a marketing deal of have people back in this area. So I thought that was kind of funny. But
do you still have a connection to wrestling at all?
Yes. Yeah. I coach, I help out with the kids club here and the high school. I've helped out, I'm just an assistant coach. I kind of volunteer, but I'm there every day pretty much now, because wrestling is that way. It kind of just sucks you back in, and I love it. And I love working with the kids. And we had 3 state championships in a row up until this last year. We got unseated this last year by David City, and we ended up getting 3rd by a half point. We had a 4-timer this year, 4-time state champion, and we had a couple 3-timers in the last few years. My boy was one of them. My boy was a 3-time state champion, and he's wrestling at Nebraska now. He's trying to make his ground there. He's trying to find a piece of a weight that he can win varsity spot at. But he's at Chad Red's weight, and he's at some tough characters in there in front of him. So he might have to bide his time a little bit and keep learning and keep getting stronger. And anyway, I'm proud to death of him. He's done a great job. But
what's it like?
I'm still involved with wrestling.
What's it like to kind of follow Jordan Burroughs, James Green, these guys that are doing really well right now at Nebraska?
Oh, I love it. Yeah, you betcha. And Brian Snyder, I helped in his early years. I was coaching with him or coaching him when he was wrestling. So I have an affinity, obviously, for all those guys. And I love seeing them do well. That's all. Carry on, because there again, that building block, back when I was first coming, whether you had the Shear brothers just come through. So I guess you had Albright and Gil Sanchez there, and it was a tough team already when I got here. I just felt like I was part of that cog in that wheel to help keep going to where it is now. And those guys are doing really well, and they got a good training center there, and I'm really proud of those Huskers, and let's keep winning world medals and hopefully some more national titles, and maybe someday we can get a team title rocking through there.
Thinking back to your career again, you were a huge 26-pounder, man. How hard was it to make that weight?
It was pretty hard. I had to be really disciplined, and there wasn't an ounce of fat anywhere to be found on my body at that time. But, and I almost went up my senior year to 134. I was thinking about going up, but we had a guy that I was for Nebraska, David Dregmuller was his name, and I was hoping we were hoping he'd be an All-American, and I think he would have been if he wouldn't have blew his knee out his senior year there. He still wrestled with a big brace and everything, but he wasn't quite the agile kid that he was before that. So I thought we had a chance to have him be an All-American and me hopefully winning at 26. So I made the sacrifice to go down because I could have went to 134. I thought, well, I'm either going to wrestle Terry Brands or Tom Brands. So, to me, it didn't matter. So I almost went up, but I decided to make that sacrifice. And it was a cut. It was, during the year, and they don't do it that way now, and I'm glad they don't. And I'm glad my boy doesn't go through that type of thing. My wife would really look at me sideways if he was going through what I went through back then. But, I get my body weight down to be weighing like 138, soaking wet, hydrated to 138. Somewhere there, 39. And then you drop that 13 pounds or whatever a week. And that was nothing. And they still do probably 8 to 10 these days, I imagine, but not probably over 10 and 10 to 13. So it was a little bit more, but you had to really be disciplined. And then I'll tell you, when that season was over, the discipline was out the window for a while.
Jason, let's
end.
But
I was pretty big, but Brands was not small himself, and neither was Kendall.
Yeah, they cut a lot of too.
Yeah, you're right. And then back then it was kind of expected of people, that's what you did. And I'm so glad they changed the rules. I was coaching at Nebraska when they changed those rules. And it was just, you just saw more light in those kids' eyes instead of doing the hard weight cut. And I'm glad it was the best thing for wrestling, I think,
Well, looking back at it, let's end with this. You farmed and you wrestled. Which is harder?
Wrestling's harder. Although farm, obviously I wasn't on the financial stressing about it every day. And my dad and mom probably had to do that. And so obviously you're going to have some farming issues that, especially hopefully, the way the times are going these days, we don't have financial crunches, but the hard work, the work was there, and it was hot and it was sweaty and it was dirty and it was, all kinds of things that I like hard work, but I don't miss the hog smell. I know that, the hog building smell, but wrestling I'd say was harder. I mean, the discipline, the making sure your weight was right, making sure you're training right, making sure you're in top shape, making sure you're always trying to find that new little technique, that new angle that'll get you where you needed to go. And wrestling's harder. Wrestling's the hardest sport there is, I think. And, I love all the other sports too, but I truly believe wrestling is the toughest. And I'm proud of that too, but that we were able to go through something like that. And it carries you through on other hard times, obviously, and you've talked to other wrestlers and coaches, and you hit other hard times, you draw back on your experiences. You just circle the wagons, you get tougher, and you build a little grip, dig a little deeper for that grit, and then move on, go on with that problem. And so it helps you for the rest of your life, really.
So you're carrying those skills with you today?
Yeah, I hope so. There's been some hard times. It ain't all been easy, but yeah, I do play as much as I can out here. My dad always gives me a hard time now because I send him a lot of pictures of, fish or deer or mushrooms, or he says, do you ever work out there? I go, well, I sell insurance here. I manage an insurance agency and it's doing well. So, and I do work hard, but I play hard.